Good evening. As mentioned, I'm Hilary Shelton. I direct the NAACP's Washington Bureau, but I also serve as Senior Vice President for Policy and Advocacy for the National NAACP. Our headquarters is located in Baltimore, Maryland. Let me tell you what an honor it is for me to be here. As my friend Abe said, a walk-on. When I found that my state conference president, President Jackson, would be here, coming down from Delaware, and I knew that if Abe was here, not too far from him would be another stalwart fighter for justice and against the injustices of the death penalty. Of course, that's my old friend Ron Hampton. So, give them all a big hand, please. The rich voices and the necessary understanding of what's going on, and other troublemaking friends that have been fighting to end the death penalty for years and years. He's right. I work for the NAACP now, an organization nationally that also opposes the death penalty. We were founded in 1909 by a small group of African American, white American, those who were from other races and ethnicities and different religious groups, all fighting to secure the issue of justice in all of America. See, we were founded just 40 years after the emancipation of African Americans and slaves. We are 107 years old today, but again, much like those who are sitting in the room, the diversity of those who actually yearned for justice and equality and opportunity for all Americans were very much a part of our beginning. So it's a wonderful thing when I see that I have a state conference president that's doing what we're supposed to do. See, we recognized in 1972 as the Supreme Court came down with the right decision. The decision to eliminate the death penalty and seeing this awful, atrocious process and practice had to end. In essence, recognizing so many other things that separate us from a truly civilized society was something that we had to take on. You know, it's an amazing thing as a young guy growing up in a city like St. Louis, Missouri, a city that's had, in many times, the highest homicide rate in the United States of America, a city that is actually the main city to the place we call Ferguson, Missouri. That many of you heard about what's happened with Michael Brown and other things along those lines, but got a chance to see an inkling of opportunity. An opportunity in which it seemed like the country would change and we finally begin to fully achieve that process of being civilized. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You see, I'm someone that's had the opportunity to visit an awful lot of other countries. As a little snotty-nosed black boy from St. Louis, got a chance to come to Washington. But I've also, in the last couple of years, I've been to just about half the countries in Europe. And of all those countries, whether it's Germany or France or Switzerland or Sweden, whether it's Slovakia or Yugoslavia, none of those countries has the death penalty now. All of those countries have grown beyond what we've experienced here in the United States, but for some reason, out of our arrogance, we still think it's a good idea to kill people, to prove that killing people is wrong. So in essence, we know that struggle is still what's what we've talked about these things that I know for you guys this is not new. But it's something that keeps me going on the fight for justice and the fight to eliminate the death penalty. Because I know what it costs. When it costs in terms of our human souls, families, local communities, and others. I know what it costs. I know what it costs in terms of the actual dollars and cents that we spend. When we decide that we'd rather execute someone that even if they're dangerous, putting them away in a prison cell for the rest of their lives, I know what it costs. I know that it is cheaper to lock someone in a jail cell for all their lives rather than go through the process of killing them. But there's so much ignorance still in our society that we believe it's cheaper to somehow take a human life while we find ourselves actually decreasing the value of all human life. So with that, I know I'm just a walk-on, but I just want to let you know how proud I am of what you're doing and how grateful I am. See, I'm a father of 3 black boys living here in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. As we think about the use of the death penalty, though we don't want to get into a discussion about whose life is worth more, or quite frankly, how we value various things along these lines, or in whose pain is more painful. Those are not the conversations that we want to ever have to have. The conversation we want to have is what is just for all Americans? What is the right thing to do, and what price will we pay to make sure we can end this awful practice? You know, the sad thing is that the United States of America, too often when we're doing polling, and I'm a political wonk, so I read a lot of polls along the way and whatnot. I'm the guy that lobbies Capitol Hill all day and every day for the NAACP, meets with all the government agencies, and when they're elected, I even go into the White House from time to time. Sometimes the message we take into those programs are not what they want to hear, but that's what they need to hear. And that's why I'm happy that you're here first at the United Methodist Church's General Board of Church and Society office. For those of you who don't know, this is a building that was actually built by United Methodist women because they believe they need to fight the good fight to make sure that all America lives up to its promises for everyone. The women's division of the United Methodists is still the most powerful division of the United Methodists. I see some smiles in the audience, and you know who's in charge of the United Methodist Church. And we thank God that is the case, because perhaps it takes the wisdom and vision of women to help move our nation in the direction that we need to go. Just a little short thing I learned during the years I worked here. You see, this building was actually built to be able to fight for three causes at the time. It was women's suffrage, that is, women should have the right to vote too. It was making sure that we ended the issues of gambling, because we thought that gambling was consuming too many people's lives and creating too many problems. And to address the issue of prohibition. There's so much drinking was creating all kinds of problems. But to show you how radical and committed these women were, this building was built to house them as well. Not just the offices and rooms like this in which you can meet and plan and prepare to have the fights we're having, that you're having while you're here. But also there were places upstairs for these women to live in as they came in 1929 and years along those lines to have these fights and do what needed to be done. But one of the things that taught me and helped me understand what was in the hearts of these freedom fighters, that even when the Congress wasn't in session, they weren't walking from door to door to visit with each of the 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate. Even when the Congress was out of session, they're doing what you do. They would plan and prepare, and actually what they'd end up doing is taking broomsticks, and they would go into the local bars, and they would chase the men out and trap, and he kicked over the money changers' tables to send the strong signal that we will not allow this to happen. It has to stop. Well, that spirit's with us when we come to gatherings like this today. We know that the law is the law and it is what it says, but we also know that one of the great things about the democracy that is the United States of America is that we too, we the people, can change the law. We have a law that is so wrong. We've seen that many times at the NAACP. We saw the law was wrong when it came to where people could live. In some neighborhoods, there were codicils written on the housing that said, if you want to sell your house, you have to sell it to somebody that looks just like you. In other words, diversity was not acceptable. We looked on the issues and saw how things were going in our schools and realized that if you happen to be a person of color, your school was substandard. And all the resources, even as equally divided as they could have been, they would only put real resources into white communities and not into African American communities or other communities of color. We saw how that was happening. The kind of trickery and programming plans were all part of that struggle. But let me say that as we take on the issue of the death penalty, it is no less. As a matter of fact, is even more profound. All those issues I discussed here are issues of what happens when you have racism in the United States. And I want to define that term for you for just a minute, because some folks don't understand what it really is. But the best definition I've ever heard of racism was actually given to me by a United Methodist preacher from Chicago. A white preacher, very actively involved in the civil rights movement. The preacher said, Hilary, racism by definition is actually racial prejudice. Those feelings that we have for no good reasons, how we fill in those gaps of places and issues that we do not understand, plus power. Think about that for a minute. Racial prejudice plus power. So when we think about the death penalty, what we're thinking about is those who have prejudicial feelings about one group of people over another group of people just because of the virtue of the color of their skin. President Jackson, I appreciated your words very much and very grateful that I have a state conference president who will stand up as you do and continue to raise these issues that are also not popular. Those who still play by the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, not understand that that's not even what the Bible intended is in your interpretation. But indeed, as we move forward on this, I want to again thank you, because I know too many. I've been to too many demonstrations. I've read too often about those who have been sentenced to death, but I also often read about the mistakes that were made all along the way. So even if you think that a life should be taken for a life, and I hope you get even beyond that, and we can move beyond those circumstances. One of the things that became very clear to me is that we've made mistakes to look at different data coming from organizations like the Death Penalty Information Center. You may have seen this data. Data that showed of all those Americans that were sentenced to death and later found to be innocent and freed, though African Americans that make up only 13% of the population make up 38% of that particular group. The only number more outrageous than that, again, is I play my political quantum, is that of all those Americans that were sentenced to death and executed and then later found to be innocent, African Americans, again, only 13% of the population make up 35% of that group. Let me just put it in these terms as I go to take my seat. The NAACP was founded to eliminate racial discrimination and disparities in every single area and every single place. What we wanted to do was end racial prejudice as we knew it and move to make sure that every American, regardless of your race, your gender, your ethnicity, or your point of national origin, all have the same rights, the same privileges, the same obligations and responsibilities, but the same real opportunity to grow up in this society and be able to make something of yourself if you simply put in the hard work. But when we see these discriminatory practices, they're still very much a part of who we are. So much to the point that we'd rather spend more money so we can enjoy, I guess, the blood-curdling feeling of seeing another human being put to death. You know, we still have a problem in America. And with that, I hold you up even higher, because I know that there's so many more that will either sit back on the sidelines and look on it and maybe appreciate what you're doing, and others that will somehow think that the status quo is the way that we ought to go. In essence, I want to thank you again and let you know that if all the members of the NAACP, we have over 500,000 of those across the country, for all the units of the NAACP, and we have about 2,200 of those throughout the United States, and again, on military bases in Italy, Germany, Korea, and Japan. We thank you, because we know, quite frankly, the very lives of our children are put in the perspective of being on that scale of justice, one that is not balanced, one that is not clear, and one that's, when it works out this way in which we use it as a death penalty, it is not even humane. So thank you again. Let's have that fight. We're going to have some fun. And for those of you all who are starving yourselves right now, it'll be great to get that great meal tomorrow, regardless of what it is, Abe. I'm not sure what you're serving, brother, but it's going to taste real good. Thank you so much.
Vigil.